is Dr. Sahar Khamis. Welcome to my program, The Bridge, a monthly show bridging different cultures, communities, and faith traditions. Watch The Bridge on America's Voice of the Arabs Network on all social media platforms. Good morning, everyone. This is your host, Dr. Sahar Khamis. Welcome to another great episode on The Bridge on US Arab Radio, airing live on US Arab Radio and also airing on Facebook and YouTube. Our topic today is a very important and timely topic. ISPU, the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding, is celebrating its 20th anniversary and also celebrating the release of its new American Muslim poll. With me this morning discussing this important and timely topic are Ms. Meira Neggaz, who is the Executive Director of ISPU, and Ms. Erum Ikramullah, who is the Research Project Manager at ISPU. Thank you so much for joining us and joining our audience at US Arab Radio.
Thank you so much, Sahar. It's always a pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you so much. So many congratulations, Mabruk, for ISPU for celebrating its 20th anniversary. That's very exciting time, I'm sure. If you can please, Meira, give our audience everywhere a brief idea about ISPU, its history, its background, the logic behind its foundation and what it's all about.
Sure. Thank you, Sahar. As you mentioned, we are now 20 years old, and the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding, best known as ISPU, was founded mainly out of the Detroit metro area by a number of individuals who, in the post 9/11 aftermath, were really noticing a gap between the conversations that were happening and what they were seeing and what they knew from their Muslim community on the ground. And they really wanted to sort of fill this information gap with solid research and evidence. So they founded ISPU really with a vision of an America where Muslims are thriving and equal, just like all Americans. And they felt that the best way to reach that goal, or at least one important way to reach that goal, was by conducting and widely sharing research and doing education based on that research, both about American Muslims, but also on related issues, on issues impacting American Muslim communities, so that everybody could make well-informed decisions and have really well-informed conversations. We always like to say, in short, that we put rigorous, relevant research into the right hands, and that's really what we do.
Yeah, and that's a very, very important task, especially when it comes to fighting misperceptions and misconceptions and stereotypes about Islam and Muslims at large, and American Muslims in particular. So how did ISPU actually evolve and change and develop over time, Meira, like from the very start or the very beginning, like you just described right now, to the present moment? How did it actually evolve and change?
Some things have changed a lot in the way that we do things, but we've stayed remarkably true to the original vision and mission that our founders laid out, 20 years ago. The wording of our mission may have changed, but we're essentially still today the organization that they wanted to create all those years ago. And that's because it works, it's effective, it's needed, it's unique, it still fills a really important gap. What has evolved, though, over time, in order for us to be even more effective and meet all the needs that exist, and there are many, a couple of things have changed. One, we've gone national. So when we were first founded, it was really a sort of Michigan-based organization for the most part. And over the past 10 or 15 years, we've really gone fully national and cover all kinds of issues around the United States. We've also honed in on our scope, realizing that we are, fairly small, and in order to have a real impact, we needed to hone in on what we were focusing on. So we used to do some foreign policy work. We no longer do that for now. We also brought our research in-house. We used to work through a large network of scholars. We still have a large and important network of scholars, of which you are one. And those scholars fill a really important gap and role, but we also brought a lot of our research in-house so that we can, have some consistency across research projects and really measure our impact. So those are the things that have changed, but we've stayed remarkably true to our mission and vision.
Fantastic. It seems like you've really been broadening and expanding your mission and vision and your scope over the years, which is great. So congratulations again on the 20th anniversary of ISPU. And Erum, now I turn to you about the significance of the American Muslim poll. That's something that ISPU has always been involved in on an annual basis. And this year, of course, 2022, you are releasing a new poll. We want to give our listeners and viewers everywhere an idea about the significance and the importance of this particular poll. Why does it really matter, and why should people be really interested in it?
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for that great question. We're always excited to talk about our poll. The significance of the poll is really huge. It's a one-of-a-kind survey. So maybe I'll start by telling everyone what the poll gives us. So the poll is a nationally representative survey of American Muslims as well as Americans of other faith and no faith. And so what it allows us to do is to ask questions of the American population and look at American Muslims and their views and results of these questions in terms of the broader national landscape. So where do they fit in relative to other groups in terms of their views, rather than as an isolated specimen, just focusing solely on American Muslims. And so what we find is that there are so many polls done across the country on, topics of the day, but you never find breakouts by Muslims. So you might be left wondering, well, I wonder what the American Muslim community thinks about X, Y, or Z issue. And so that's what American Muslim poll provides. So what the impact of that is or what the result is, that we can inform the work being done within Muslim communities with rigorous research, so that people don't have to base their work on anecdotal evidence. And we want to make sure that American Muslim views and opinions are noted and contributed as part of national conversations taking place.
I think this is very important, especially when it comes to the big gap related to the understanding of Islam and Muslims at large, and also American Muslims in particular. Many people may wonder how this particular poll is actually carried out. What is the process? What are the steps taken? And as well as what are some of the obstacles and challenges which you may actually encounter when trying to do something on that scope? Can you please give us an idea about that, Erum?
Yeah, and I'll keep brief, but I could definitely talk for hours about this. But the poll is a huge undertaking by our organization. It involves all team members of ISPU contributing. But basically what we do is we partner with a nationally recognized polling firm called SSRS. They do polling for CNN, the Washington Post, and other nationally recognized outlets. So we partner with them to ensure a rigorous methodology is used. So for example, we use both phone and web-based surveys, using all the right statistical methods to ensure that the data are representative of these groups and that we're reaching everyone. And then we work with a team of analysts, to analyze the data and tease out the important findings. So that's just sort of getting our data and our findings. We produce the report, but then there's lots of work done in terms of disseminating. As Meira mentioned, we like to educate based on the research that we discover. So that is just as important as actually conducting the poll, is actually doing what we're doing right now, which is connecting with audiences to share the findings.
Very important. Thank you so much for this insight. And Meira, actually, one thing that caught my attention, and I believe a lot of people's attention, is the fact that ISPU is one of a kind organization which remarkably has an all-female leadership. right? For that to be also an organization that is involved about, American Muslims and American Muslims' lives. I want you to give our listeners and viewers, please, some idea about the significance and the importance of this particular, all-female leadership. Was it intentional? And what are the meanings or the messages there to the public or the wider audience?
Yeah, it's funny. We are all female. And in fact, we're not all just female leadership. All of our staff are female, period. So we have 10 staff members. All of us happen to be women. And I say happen to be women because it is coincidental. It was not intentional. It was not deliberate. I think, ISPU, given the nature of what we do as a research and education organization, we recognize fully that ISPU is its people. We are powered by the people who inhabit our organization, because so much of what we do is people powered. We don't have a physical space. It's all about the research that we produce and the education that we do. We also have a value of excellence at our organization. And I think, recognizing how important people are and recognizing how important excellence is in everything that we do, we simply hire the best people for the job, whoever they may be. And it just so happens that for every hiring process, the person who came out on top and was the best person for the job happened to be women. So we ended up with an all-female staff. I will say, though, that ISPU's universe is large. We have a diverse scholar network of, I think, over 50 now scholars. We have a board that is very important to our mission and our work. We have advisors and research teams for every project. So those bodies are very, very diverse, even if our staff is all female. In terms of the message, people are going to interpret that in their own way, through their own lens. For me, it really is about having the best people in place to be most effective and most impactful.
Yeah, I cannot help but think, as a professor also of women's studies, beside the professor of communication, and also someone who has written about Islamic feminism and women's empowerment in the Arab/Muslim world, I cannot help but think that this also sends a very loud and clear message that Muslim women are capable, they are able, they are empowered, and they do have loud voices as well as a lot of skills and expertise. And I think that is an implicit message that ISPU is sending loud and clear, and I really appreciate it very much. And I think a lot of our publics and audiences will appreciate it as well. We'll come back to this very interesting and important discussion right after this commercial break. Stay tuned, please.
As we continue to face COVID-19, we're now facing flu season. Influenza has the potential to infect millions, putting lives and the healthcare system at risk. Now more than ever, it's essential to protect yourself from influenza by getting the flu vaccine. The flu vaccine is safe and effective and can't give you the flu. To protect yourself and those at highest risk, get your flu vaccine. Learn more at michigan.gov/flu. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
At Top Rehab Physical Therapy Clinic in Dearborn, we provide effective physical therapy sessions in order to limit pain and discomfort. Top Rehab provides physical therapy care for any diagnosis prescribed by a physician, and we regularly see and treat conditions such as stroke, TMJ, fibromyalgia, sciatica, joint pain, and more. We use a variety of pain management methods, including modalities, soft tissue mobilization, and therapeutic exercise. If you're in need of physical rehabilitation or physical therapy, get the highest quality health care at Top Rehab. Most insurance is accepted, and we're open Monday, Wednesday, and Friday 8 to 6, Tuesday and Thursday 8 to 5, and Saturday 10 till 2. Call for an appointment today at 313-846-0555. That's 313-846-0555. Choose Top Rehab Physical Therapy Clinic on Michigan Avenue in Dearborn. Life's too short to be in pain. Enjoy the first Syrian-style cuisine in Michigan. At Damas Cuisine and Catering, you'll find a wide selection of Syrian foods and sweets in our menu, like frike, hoizi, grape leaves with steak, mashawi platter, hot mahashi, char-grilled kebab, shawarma, and much more. Get super fast delivery from Damas Cuisine and Catering right to your door. Order online at damascuisine.com/menu and track your order live. Damas Cuisine and Catering, 28841 Orchard Lake Road in Farmington Hills. Call 248-987-4985.
This is Dr. Sahar Khamis. Welcome to my program, The Bridge, a monthly show bridging different cultures, communities, and faith traditions. Watch The Bridge on America's Voice of the Arabs Network on all social media platforms. Welcome back to the show, everyone. This is your host, Dr. Sahar Khamis, and we are discussing today the 20th anniversary of ISPU, as well as the release of the American Muslim Poll of 2022. And with me this morning discussing this important and lively topic is Meira Neggaz, the Executive Director of ISPU, and Erum Ikramullah, the Research Project Manager of ISPU. So, Erum, if we want to talk about the Islamophobia Index, that is a very important part of the ISPU poll on an annual basis. People look forward to understanding how Islamophobia is actually being played out in many contexts, unfortunately, how it is still representing some kind of threat to many Muslim communities, including American Muslims. Can you give us an idea, what is the Islamophobia Index? What is the importance and significance of this particular index? And also, how is it different this year compared to previous years?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'll definitely start by explaining what it is. So the Islamophobia Index is a measure that we created in conjunction with other researchers starting in 2018. It's an index, so a measure of public opinion and agreement with anti-Muslim tropes. So there are 5 items in the poll that comprise this index. And those items include their statements that we ask respondents to rate their level of agreement with. So these include things like most Muslims living in the US are more prone to violence than others. Most Muslims living in the US discriminate against women. Most Muslims living in the US are hostile to the United States. Most Muslims living in the US are less civilized. And most Muslims living in the US are partially responsible for acts of violence carried out by other Muslims. And so we know that these are, common tropes or stereotypes held about Muslims, but that's not the reason why we chose those 5 in particular. These 5 measures are based on previous research linking perceptions with greater tolerance for anti-Muslim policy. So a higher level of agreement with those 5 stereotypes about Muslims is associated with greater tolerance for anti-Muslim policies. These policies include things like mosque surveillance, racial profiling, and increased scrutiny of Muslims at airports, and even policies like the Muslim ban. So essentially, they're associated with taking away rights from Americans who are Muslim. And so that's why, in particular, we chose, because they sort of highlight these 5 measures, and the agreement with these measures highlight that Islamophobia is bad for democracy and security, and bad for everyone, not just Muslims. So that's in particular what the Islamophobia Index is.
Right. And I want to really, as an audience or someone who, not even just as a, a scholar, expert scholar with ISPU, but just as a member of also the ordinary public, I want to understand, like, now we're living in the Biden, era. How is the Islamophobia Index now, let's say, as reflected in the results of the American Muslim Poll of 2022, different than, let's say, a few years back during the Trump era, when we had the Muslim Travel Ban 1, Muslim Travel Ban 2, a lot of other measures or policies that somehow impacted the image of American Muslims and Muslims at large? Are we seeing any kind of shift or changes in this Islamophobia Index, Erum?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So we've measured it since 2018. So we can make comparisons, from 2022 to 2018. So what we found this year, particular to 2022, is that American Muslims scored 26, which was on par with Protestants, non-affiliated, the general public, many other groups. And also American Muslims themselves scored higher than Jewish Americans. So the takeaway when we look over time is that Muslims themselves are more likely to endorse anti-Muslim tropes since 2016, while other groups have actually declined in their agreement. So the major finding this year was this issue of internalized Islamophobia, that it is possible, and previous research on other minority groups has shown that people within the group can sort of take on or report agreement with the bias held against them. So we've kind of dubbed that, it's broadly known as internalized oppression. Here we call it internalized Islamophobia. So that's really the story of 2022. And when we dig deeper in the findings to better understand what's going on, we found that Islamophobia has risen sharply among American Muslims who identify as white. So they have a much more higher likelihood of agreeing with those tropes compared to American Muslims of other racial and ethnic groups. We also find that younger Muslims are slightly more likely also to exhibit internalized Islamophobia. And so, understanding it's definitely a very sensitive finding, but we've consulted with scholars, and what we've done, what we've uncovered to sort of understand what might be going on is that when you look at and I think we'll touch on this later, but the data on discrimination, we've seen that discrimination against Muslims has remained steady, like higher than all other groups consistently. It didn't decrease during the Biden administration. So around 60% of Muslims since 2016 have said that they have experienced religious discrimination in the past year. And American Muslims since 9/11 have, endured anti-Muslim bigotry in many forms, institutional, through the media, consistently for the past 20 years. And so one theory is that kind of this internalized oppression is sort of the culmination of all that, is that American Muslims consume the same media that everybody else consumes. So the messaging, and we're just as susceptible to the messaging in that media as other groups. So that's one idea of what might be going on with this finding.
I am particularly interested in this point about the internalized Islamophobia because it's really very interesting, very important, and somehow I would say even scary to an extent, because that explains why some Muslim communities, not just inside the US, but globally or universally and internationally, might vote for some right-wing groups or parties that might have Islamophobic views or tendencies. And we still see some Muslim voters giving their voices to some of these right-wing groups. So the internalized Islamophobia might be an explanation, definitely, for these types of tendencies, and that needs to be checked and something that needs to be monitored. So I'm glad that ISPU is doing this work, and I hope that other organizations internationally will engage in this type of research as well. Meira, also the midterm elections are coming up soon in November, and that's definitely a very important topic that everybody is interested in. So in terms of ISPU's research and also the American Muslim poll and all of that, how are we seeing the image or the picture of American Muslims' political involvement, their tendency to vote? One thing that really caught my attention in the results of this year's poll is this decrease or decline in the quote unquote, inshallah voters. I really like the term very much, which means those who say, okay, inshallah, I'm going to vote, but they're not even registered voters. We are seeing a decline in this and an increase in the number of American Muslims who are registered to vote. Can you please shed light on this process of American Muslims voting, as well as the political participation of American Muslims at large, please?
Sure. So as you said, we've been tracking this data for 6 years now. And we've asked questions about civic and political engagement since we started doing this annual, now biennial poll in 2016. And one of the main findings around political and civic engagement is indeed this closing of the gap for the Inshallah voter. So what we found in 2016 was that 85% of Muslims who were eligible to vote at the time said they wanted to vote or they planned to vote, but only 60% were actually registered to vote. So there was a large gap in intention to vote versus the reality of actually making it to the polling place. That gap has essentially closed as registration for voting has climbed steadily among Muslims and now is basically on par with other groups. It used to be that Muslim voter registration was much, much lower than other American faith groups. I don't know, we didn't ask what the cause of that is, so I can't tell you definitively why that gap has closed. My guess, if I had to surmise, are a couple of things. One, the political situation since 2016 through now has been volatile, polarizing, and often very challenging. That could have galvanized some people to want to vote and to really take action. There have also been incredible efforts to get out the vote by many organizations and leaders. And I'm, sure that some of that has contributed to this increase in registration. There also have been many Muslim candidates at the local, state, and federal level. That's possible that has attracted people to voting as well. I can't tell you definitively what the mix is, but that's my guess. The main challenges that still remain, however, that we've seen from our data are two. One is getting people to actually vote. So people are registered to vote, but does that mean they're actually getting to the polls to vote, right? Because that is a different question. The second potential challenge, or the second challenge that could potentially be addressed, is that across the board since 2016, there's sort of been this intractable group of Muslims who do not have any intention to vote, right? It's not that there's a gap, it's just that they do not intend to vote for whatever reason. And there are many reasons why people have said they don't want to vote. Right now, that figure stands at about 15%. So about 15% of Muslims who are eligible to vote don't plan to vote and won't vote. So those are the two areas that I think are still ripe for a lot of intervention.
These are indeed very important points that deserve even further research and further investigation. We'll come back to this very interesting and lively discussion right after this commercial break. Stay tuned, please.
When you're looking for the best in optical care, Dr. Meira Neggaz is your doctor to see. With years of experience and thousands of successful procedures performed, you can trust your eyes to Dr. Meira Neggaz. See Dr. Meira Neggaz and his professional staff for your eye care needs. There's 2 locations to serve you. In Hazel Park, call 248-336-3937. 248-336-3937. In Rochester Hills, call 248-299-3937. That's 248-299-3937.
Get ready for an amazing experience at Ishtar Restaurant on 15 Mile Road in Sterling Heights. Enjoy excellent hospitality from owners Ali Al-Baghdadi and Fatty Bottom, serving the best in Mediterranean food. Try Chef Ali Al-Baghdadi's famous shawarma, the best Iraqi grills and food, and the best Arabic and international dishes. Dine in our authentic atmosphere or take out. Call 586-698-2585 or check us out on Facebook. Ishtar Restaurant practices all CDC guidelines and is open every day 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. Have an amazing experience today at Ishtar Restaurant, 3625 15 Mile Road, Sterling Heights.
Are your hands feeling numb? Do you feel pain opening up a jar, turning a key? Are you noticing that your elbow and your shoulder are becoming stiff? Or were you recently injured in your arm? Hello, I'm Dr. Al-Majid Katranji, and at the Katranji Hand Center, which just recently opened down the street from the Somerset Mall, we can provide you with the latest in hand, wrist, elbow, and shoulder care. Visit us at www.katranjihandcenter.com to learn the latest techniques that we have to offer you, and I look forward to taking care of you.
Visit us in Troy at 1565 West Big Beaver Road, Building F, or call Katranji Hand Center for an appointment at 248-869-4263. That's 248-869-4263.
Are you going to start a restaurant or grocery store soon? Do you need floor plans and designs? Call Naji Abood at 734-744-9796. Do you want to buy kitchen and restaurant equipment at discount prices? Call Naji Abood now, 734-744-9796. New Concept Products and Design, the trademark of kitchen equipment. 5% discount on all purchases of $75,000 or more. New Concept Products and Design, new location, 31185 Schoolcraft in Livonia. Learn more at www.newconceptproducts.com. Call Naji Abood, 734-744-9796.
This is Dr. Sahar Khamis. Welcome to my program, The Bridge, a monthly show bridging different cultures, communities, and faith traditions. Watch The Bridge on America's Voice of the Arabs Network on all social media platforms. Welcome back to the show, everyone. This is your host, Dr. Sahar Khamis, and we are discussing today a very important and timely topic, the 20th anniversary of ISPU, as well as the release of the 2020 American Muslim poll. And with me this morning discussing this topic are Ms. Meira Neggaz, who is the Executive Director of ISPU, and Ms. Erum Ikramullah, the Research Project Manager at ISPU. So Erum, when we were talking about the results of the poll, you also mentioned something about some of the changes and the shifts. I think our audiences would be interested to know something about how the demographic profile of the American Muslims is shifting as reflected in the results of the 2022 American Muslim poll, as well as possibly some of the elements of discrimination that still remain, that are somehow exhibited against the American Muslim group or segment of society so far, and how that is reflected in the data of this 2020 poll. Can you please comment on these 2 points?
Sure. In terms of demographics, we didn't find huge demographic shifts. So Muslims, just as we found in like 2017 or previously, are still America's youngest faith community. We have a large segment of young people. We're also, American Muslims are still the most likely faith community to be poor. And American Muslims are as likely as other groups, in terms of their college degree attainment. So education-wise, still where we were before. What was new this year that we got to ask, which was really exciting, was to ask about employment, job creation, and military service. So those are some new demographics that we added this year. And what we found is that American Muslims were, and this sort of reflects the young age, but American Muslims were least likely of all other groups to be retired, so more likely to be working, which very much is in line with the finding on age, because we're a younger community. So we have fewer who are retired. And then we found that nearly 1 in 10 Muslims, which is on par with all other groups except Jewish Americans, are 1 in 10 Muslims own their own business. So it's 8%. So nearly 1 in 10 own their own business. And interestingly, though, Muslim owners were more likely than other groups to employ more people. So American Muslim businesses employed an average of 8 employees, while other groups, employed fewer. And so we did an estimate in terms of job creation using that data, and we found that American Muslims create an estimated 1.37 million jobs. So what's great is, what this reflects is the economic contributions that American Muslims are making in the country. We also find that American Muslims, while they're less likely than other groups to be US citizens, they were as likely as other groups, specifically Catholics and Protestants, to serve in the US military. So 11% of American Muslims have had some service in the US military, on par or more likely than other groups.
Very interesting and very important facts. Like, I always think that ISPU is doing a great job of fighting falsehoods with facts, which is a very important point, that, to dispel some of the myths and the stereotypes and the misperceptions and misconceptions about who Muslims are and who American Muslims are, by giving the relevant facts and important facts. So Erum, also, you mentioned something earlier about discrimination, that, although we're seeing some improvement in some of these, factors or elements, we are still witnessing a significant amount of or degree of discrimination in some cases and in some ways against American Muslims. Can you please shed light on some of these forms of discrimination as reflected in this year's results?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, American Muslims remain the most likely to report experiencing religious discrimination in the past year. So this year it was 62% who reported that. And this has remained steady over the past 6 years. And when we dig deeper into, the settings where that discrimination takes place, we find that American Muslims are the most likely group who have faced religious discrimination, to face that discrimination in an institutional setting. So some of those institutional settings might include, at the airport, when applying for a job, and when receiving healthcare services. So those are some examples of those institutional settings. At the same time, American Muslims are still, just as likely to also experience religious discrimination in their interpersonal interactions, whether that's from friends or coworkers or out when dealing with the public. So we're kind of seeing it on all fronts.
Of course, issues like discrimination is not going to disappear between day and night, right? It's something that's going to take a lot of work and hard work over a long period of time, but at least research as important and as significant as the one conducted by ISPU, at least sheds light on these forms of discrimination and tries to make the public aware of them, so that hopefully we can move in the direction of trying to eradicate or overcome some of these forms of bias, stereotyping, and discrimination. Meira, the pandemic was a very important threat, but also a very important opportunity. It did pose a lot of challenges and threats to so many communities. The American Muslim community is no exception, for sure. But I believe it also gave a lot of room for good work and good deeds. And as we say in public relations, public relations is about doing good and telling people about it. What does this year's results tell us about the work and the great charity and contributions which American Muslims have contributed in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic and its aftermath?
Yeah, I really appreciate this question. I think Muslim communities have spent necessarily so much time, Muslim communities and allies have spent so much time in recent years and decades sort of doing what you were talking about before, combating misunderstanding, misrepresentation, really, providing facts over any kind of fear or misunderstanding. But what sometimes gets lost in that are the incredible contributions that Muslims have made to America, to the United States and far beyond. And so I love this question because I think, this is something that doesn't often get highlighted and yet is such an integral part of Muslim communities and how they exist in the world. Muslims we know from our research just generally prior to the pandemic that Muslims are incredibly charitable and charitable minded. So not only in giving money, but in really taking action, working with their neighbors to collaborate, to solve problems, all those kinds of good things. And the pandemic, as you mentioned, was a real challenge, but also a great opportunity, and really kicked Muslim communities into, that tendency to be philanthropic and charitable into high gear. We conducted a study this year called, last year that was published this year as well, called Community in the Time of Corona. And part of what we looked at there was how Muslims were in fact responding throughout the, first part of the pandemic. And what we saw was not a surprise. It fit well into what we know about Muslim communities being very, very charitable. But we know that Muslims supported in all areas the work to address COVID, not just within Muslim communities, but far beyond in America as a whole. So, for example, we know that Muslims make up somewhat of a disproportionate amount or percentage of medical professionals. In Michigan, for example, where just under 3% of the Michigan population is Muslim, Muslims make up about 15% of the physicians in the state. And they were really on the front lines of COVID initially in the beginning. Food security. A third of Muslims live in poverty, live with minimal resources. And many people in their communities who are not Muslim also are struggling. Many mosques and Islamic centers and other nonprofits early on scheduled food and grocery distributions. And this was actually, of all the categories we looked at in terms of how Muslims were helping, this was the most frequently reported type of response by American Muslims across the country. When it came to safety, Muslims donated blood, they made masks, they distributed masks and other PPE, and the list just goes on and on and on. So it was really a great opportunity for Muslims to showcase that philanthropic charitable side that is really a tendency throughout Muslim communities, as well as really support people in need at a needy time.
I think these are very, very important points and very important contributions. As we said, it's important not just to shed light on the discrimination, the bias, the stereotyping, but to also shed light on the much needed area of charity, good work, positive contributions. What are Muslims doing and what are American Muslims in particular doing to contribute not just to the American Muslim community, but beyond to the wider American community and even globally to the rest of the world. And I think that's a very good recipe to fight any form of discrimination, bias, and stereotyping against Muslims at large and American Muslims in particular. We'll come back to this very interesting and lively discussion right after this commercial break. Stay tuned, please.
Kushat's Mediterranean Market and Shish Kebab offers a great array of your favorite Mediterranean meals. Meals range from lamb specialties, shawarma sandwiches, seafood dinners, and they offer special big trays of your favorite food, plus much more. Kushat's Mediterranean Market and Shish Kebab address is 32839 Northwestern Highway in Farmington Hills. Their phone number is 248-538-9552. That number again is 248-538-9552, and the supermarket is open from 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. Kushat's Mediterranean Market and Shish Kebab will definitely leave you satisfied.
Life is a nonprofit charity that's provided humanitarian aid and development to people and communities for over 25 years, regardless of race, color, religion, or cultural background. When disaster occurs here or around the world, Life for Relief and Development rushes in to provide food, medical aid, and shelter to those in need. Please help improve these efforts. Make your tax-deductible donation to Life now at lifeusa.org or call 248-424-7493. When it comes to reproductive medicine, IVF Michigan Fertility Centers are the recognized leaders. With locations in Bloomfield Hills and 5 other cities in Michigan and Ohio, IVF has experts in all aspects of the field. As a founding member of IVF Michigan Fertility Centers, Dr. Nicholas Shama is one of the leading reproductive endocrinologists in Michigan and Ohio. Dr. Shama has performed over 10,000 IVF cases and has helped thousands of couples fulfill their dreams of parenthood. American board certified in both obstetrics and gynecology and reproductive endocrinology and infertility, Dr. Nicholas Shama is a very caring, compassionate, expert physician that understands not only the medical but also the emotional toil of infertility on his patients. When it's time, get personalized care from Dr. Nicholas Shama at IVF Michigan Fertility Centers in Michigan and Ohio. Call toll-free 855-952-9600, 855-952-9600.
Ziyad brand. Quality products from our family to yours. Ziyad Brothers Importing offers the finest quality products, including brands like Sultan, Kraft, Nestle, Hook, Rico Picon, Donna, and many more. Ask your retailer to carry these fine products because you deserve the very best. For more information, visit our website at www.ziad.com. That's www.ziad.com. Ziad, quality products from our family to yours.
This is Dr. Sahar Khamis. Welcome to my program, The Bridge, a monthly show bridging different cultures, communities, and faith traditions. Watch The Bridge on America's Voice of the Arabs Network on all social media platforms. Welcome back to the show, everyone. This is your host, Dr. Sahar Khamis. And we're having today a very lively and interesting discussion, celebration of ISPU's 20th anniversary, and also the release of the American Muslim Poll of 2022. And with me this morning discussing this important and lively topic are Ms. Meira Neggaz, who is the Executive Director of ISPU, and Ms. Erum Ikramullah, who is the Research Project Manager at ISPU. Erum, really the American Muslim Poll is very, very interesting. I cannot wait to read all of it, or at least most of it, as much as I can and as soon as possible to get a more holistic picture of all of these interesting findings and results we have been discussing so far. Additionally, I think it's very important for our audiences, our listeners and viewers to get a good sense of the most important recommendations that this important poll also came up with. So can you please give us a summary of some of these most important recommendations?
Yeah, and as you mentioned, there's so much in the poll report, but what that allows us to do is to really tease out recommendations for particular stakeholder groups. So we were able to make recommendations, to more 6, 7, 8 stakeholder groups. So for Muslim community leaders, and this relates to the findings Meira shared around voter registration. There's, as she mentioned, there's still work to be done. So we recommend, direct get out the vote messaging to continue within the Muslim community to ensure that people actually get to the polls to cast their vote. Another huge recommendation for Muslim community leaders is recognizing this issue of internalized Islamophobia as a major challenge facing the Muslim community, and in particular, some segments of the Muslim community, such as young Muslims, and to integrate accurate information about the community into their educational content. And that also kind of gets into this issue also for Muslim community leaders is to addressing Muslim mental health challenges with greater awareness and resource allocation. This definitely relates to the issue of internalized Islamophobia, but also it goes beyond that. So that's one additional important recommendation. For interfaith leaders and allies, some important recommendations we make are to seek to partner with Muslim organizations and leaders on issues of collective importance, such as climate change and public health. We had some important data in the report on those topics, so I hope your viewers will take a look at those findings as well. And to also include anti-Islamophobia content in inclusion and diversity trainings, policies, and hiring practices. And also an important recommendation for interfaith leaders and allies is to recognize Islamophobia as both something that occurs at the individual, but also the institutional level. And then for media, social media, and media in general, engage Muslim communities in a review of platform norms and the application of policies towards Muslim users, and also to include anti-Islamophobia content at those organizations as well. So that's a highlight. And then for media professionals specifically, equipping news or writers' rooms with resources to portray Muslim communities accurately and creatively, keeping in mind the impact of trope perpetuating media on Muslim self-concept. So how media portrayals might contribute to issues like internalized Islamophobia. And we're really happy to share that ISPU has tons of resources for media professionals. So I definitely recommend people use our website for that.
These are all excellent recommendations. Let me just highlight, three of them that I think are very, very important. The fight against internalized Islamophobia, not just external, but also internal Islamophobia, as we explained before or talked about before in this conversation, is a very important point that somehow is a blind spot. People talk about external Islamophobia against Muslim communities, including the American Muslim community, but internalized Islamophobia is very seldom brought up. So I'm really glad that the recommendations and the results are tackling this important point. Another point, of course, is the mental health. And this week, as we all know, is Mental Health Awareness Week. So I think it's very important that ISPU is taking the opportunity and shedding light on the importance of mental health issues within the American Muslim community, as well as the American community at large, and even the rest of the world. We all need to pay attention to self-care, and that includes definitely mental health and mental well-being. So I'm glad that this is also another point. And of course, the coordination with other faith groups and interfaith leaders is very important, because as I always say, we are all in this together. This is not just about the American Muslim community, it's impacting everyone, including people in other faith communities. So the coordination here is very important. And as a communication and media scholar, I cannot help but show my excitement about the fact that ISPU is also trying to give some training and guidelines and important tips and clues for those who are media professionals on how to cover and how to tackle Muslim-related issues in a healthy and positive way, while avoiding negative stereotypes, tropes, and misconceptions. So thank you so much for this amazing work. And Meira, I'm going to end with you with a little bit of a broad question. We talked about the history of ISPU, how it started, how it developed, and how it changed over the years. What about your future mission and vision? What are your future steps and future plans when it comes to ISPU moving forward? And also, what kind of impact or effects are you hoping to actually produce or create, on the ground in real life situations moving forward?
Thank you so much, Sahar. Whenever anyone asks me about impact, the first thing in my head is, how much time do you have? Because our impact is what gets me really excited about our work, because research can make such an impact if it's just utilized and put into the real world. And I get very excited seeing how our research has done that. So I'm going to actually start by answering that question first, and then tell you a little bit about my hopes for the future. I mentioned, I think in the beginning, that really in shorthand, what we do is we put rigorous research into the right hands, and we do that through discovering, so conducting our own rigorous research, and then utilizing that research to educate the general public, raise awareness around the issues that we're looking at, and really equip change makers. Change makers can be anybody. They could be a person in a family who, cares about these issues and works to address misconceptions within their own family about Muslims or issues impacting them. It could be people at the White House and everything in between. So anyone who has a sphere of influence to change things for the better is someone that we want to reach, or anyone who's interested in just learning more about Muslims. I'll tell you, for example, a Nexus Fund landscape analysis. This was a funder. They did a landscape analysis to look at all of the organizations, or a lot of the organizations that were working to combat anti-Muslim sentiment and work to support Muslim communities. And what they found is that of all the organizations they interviewed, and I think there were 41, so only one did not mention ISPU as the go-to resource for them in terms of doing their work effectively. And that is amazing. That is what we want, for those people to have us as a resource and to help them make their work more effective. We also know, in terms of raising awareness, for example, the 1 year that we were able to track this in 2018, through the work that Erum and you were both talking about with the media, 1 billion eyes, 1 billion readers saw an article in the media that quoted or had ISPU data or information in it. That is a lot of people who are better informed and are able to make better decisions and have better conversations because of our work. I'll just give you one example of how this actually works in the real world. we have data on bullying of Muslim children, and it's stark and it's disturbing data that roughly half of Muslim families who have children of school age have a child who's being bullied because of their religion. Now, unbeknownst to us, a gentleman named Reverend Nate Walker saw this data, was really alarmed by it, and started working with his colleagues and partners to develop a program for, I think it was the Cub Scouts in New York. It was some kind of scout group in New York, to develop a diversity training and sort of combating anti-Muslim sentiment training for the tens of thousands of children that are in this program. And that kind of passing the baton to people who implement this work is what happens every single day in almost every sector. So it's really, really exciting. In terms of the future, we need to do what we're doing now and do much, much more of it. There are so many topics, there are so many issues, there are so many things that we still need to explore, that still need to be addressed. There are so many stories of, about Muslim experiences that need to be shared through data and research. And really the only thing that is holding us back from doing any of those things is resources and thus capacity to do it. So I hope for big things for ISPU. I just hope we can do what we're doing and do much, much more of it and reach more and more people.
Amen to that. I think ISPU is doing an amazing job. It's really a unique organization, one of a kind, doing much needed work to help the American Muslim community and to help the American community at large and even the rest of the world. Because as we all said before, we are all in this together. We cannot separate or divorce American Muslim issues from the rest of the community inside and outside the United States, whether we're talking about Muslims or other faith groups or the world at large. So I really wish you continued success, much more, success in all the work that you are doing for many years to come. Once again, congratulations to ISPU on 20 great years, and looking forward to the next 20 years and to more interesting and lively research. Thank you so much, Meira, and thank you, Erum, for being our guests today on The Bridge.
Thank you, Sahar.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks to all our listeners and viewers everywhere. Take care, stay well, and stay blessed. Thank you and goodbye.